there, Colin, aka the Tone Wizard, and welcome to Ween Talk episode 2. I hope that none of my technological temper tantrum got captured there. The computer was just hopelessly frozen, so I thought I would play some buenos. Anyways, welcome to episode 2. I am Colin, aka the Tone Wizard. Please feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you would like. This is episode 2. I did episode 1 about 3 weeks ago, and I said in that video that if it got some views and some likes that I'd make a second video, and it's approaching a couple hundred views in a couple of weeks, which for my small channel is pretty good. So here we are with another video. Now, the first video addressed the infamous Dean Ween meltdown show, which was a show that I happened to be at in my hometown here of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I got a couple of comments on social media, on Instagram specifically, about it being the kind of low point and a weird spot to start a sort of show. But I mean, I was there, and as I pointed out in my first video, it was my first Ween show, and it's by no means an insignificant event in the sort of history of Ween. And, you know, after that show, even with it being such a weird kind of experience, it did not deter me from getting more into Ween. In fact, it had quite the opposite effect. I really wanted to know about the band, and it's led me to some great experiences ever since then. So, in any event, with that in mind, I'm going to take a right turn, and this episode is going to be called The Rise of Aaron Freeman. And in this episode, we're going to get a little redemption here, because we're going to cover the period of time in early 2012 to 2014, where Ween kind of dissolved, albeit temporary, and then Freeman kind of ascended, and that culminated with the release of the 2014 album Freeman. So we're going to look at that period of time and what happened. Now, I am, as I've said in the other video, I'm by no means the foremost expert in Ween, or anything for that matter, despite what you may hear me say in some of my other videos. So if you see anything that is factually inaccurate, if I get some dates wrong or anything like that, please, by all means, just let me know in the comments below, because this is the internet, and I want this to be a sort of open source experience. So please, by all means, if you see or hear me say anything wrong or show you something wrong, let me know about it. Gotta get some tea in me here, because I got a little bit of a chest cold, which I'm hoping is not the coronavirus, which I know little about other than the fact that my brother is convinced that the world is going to be ending within about 4 weeks here. So in any event, let's get right into it here. So I've got open on the screen here the brownbase.org website. If you don't know what this is, you should really check it out, because it is a comprehensive database of every Ween show, as far as I know, ever played. You can search by the year. You can search by the song. You can see every time the song was played. You can see when the first time and the last time the song was played. It's really comprehensive. And when I say that I am by no means the biggest Ween fan in the world, this site alone is proof of that fact. So thank you to the makers of brownbase.org. If you made that site, or if you know who made that site, I would love to hear about that and who those people are. But yeah, check this site out. It's pretty amazing. But anyways, I wanted to track the period after January 24th, which was the Meltdown show in Vancouver. And I kind of wanted to see how things progressed after that, and sort of follow a timeline up to the release of the Freeman album. So January 24th, 2011, they play the Meltdown show, but a few days later, they actually play down in Seattle, and they do a run down the west coast of Portland and stuff like that. And by all accounts, those were fantastic shows, and any kind of fear or trepidation amongst the fan base that Ween was going down fast kind of ended. And they continue to play dates, according to brownbase.org, throughout 2011, with the final shows being a run on the 30th and the 31st of December 2011 at the Fillmore Auditorium in Denver. Of course, in 2016, they would later reunite in Denver, and they played a lot in Denver and had some pretty good shows there over the years. So that's kind of a nice little bookending thing. But anyways, that's getting too far ahead of ourselves. So you've got the last show on December the 31st, 2011. And after that, they kind of took their kind of holiday break. They seemed to take a break around that time and kind of resurface later on in January or February. From what I've seen over the last couple of years of them touring. I also found the on archive.org. Oh, where did it go? I think I closed that. I'll just open that up. I'll put the link to that later. But archive.org had a bootleg of the Fillmore show, and there's a really good version of the Blarney Stone at the end of that. It's pretty rough, but it's definitely a good one. So that was the last song that they played in 2011 before the hiatus. So this is kind of getting ahead of ourselves here. But anyways, in May 8th of 2012, Jeaner released Marvelous Clouds under his own name. Now, Marvelous Clouds, if you don't know, is a collection of covers that he did of Rod McEwen. Now, Rod McEwen is a folk singer kind of guy. His songs were covered by some pretty big people, including Frank Sinatra, and I believe Bob Dylan, maybe Gordon Lightfoot as well. I'd have to check that out. But in the 60s, he was kind of a folk poet and musician and singer. And Aaron plays a whole album of that stuff. And I think it's just him, maybe some studio musicians, and there's a synthesizer sort of keyboard whiz that accompanies him on that album. And he talks about that on the Marc Maron podcast, which we're going to get into as well. But it's just a pretty straight up album of him doing covers from Rod McEwen. And the idea to do that was actually from the 12 Golden Country Greats producer, Ben Vaughn. He'd reached out to Jeaner about doing a cover album of Rod McEwen songs, and Jeaner did it. Now, in an interview with the Rolling Stone, Jeaner said about the album, "I'd been having an identity crisis for a long time. It's really weird having two names, and I wanted to be Aaron Freeman. I was born with that name, but everybody I knew, it seemed, was calling me Jeaner or Gene. I love singing in different voices. Maybe it's my age, but I really just wanted to have my own voice and really make sure that I stuck to it. I wanted to make sure I sang it straight. With Rod McEwen's songs, there's no reason to affect your voice." So he was kind of, at that point, sort of shedding the Dean Ween identity there. And of course, later that month, on either May 29th or May 30th, there's a couple of different sort of conflicting things. But here is an article from Consequences of Sound. But basically, the date is either the 29th or the 30th. I think that Aaron actually talked to the Rolling Stone on the 28th and announced that he was leaving, or that Ween was breaking up. And I don't really like to get into kind of any personal things or to put myself in a position where I can imagine what anybody was thinking or intending at the time. But according to the Consequences of Sound article that I have here, and I'll put the link to this, it's not much of an article here, but I'll put the link here. According to him, Dean and Ween's publicist had no idea, and they said, quote, "It was news to me." But again, I'm not really going to get into any of the political or emotional side of things because I don't know them. I don't know what they were thinking. And I often find that, like, when I'm watching a Beatles documentary or something like that, where there's a lot of story and a lot of lore to it, and you get these people who are kind of in the inner circle and they claim to know how somebody's feeling, you kind of get contrasting opinions depending who you speak of. And as years go by, people don't really remember things in an unbiased way. So I'm not really going to talk about, firsthand knowledge of anything that they may have been thinking or feeling. And I'm going to try and keep this pretty factual here. So the account that I had was that they announced the breakup on the 29th or the 30th. And the Rolling Stone ran an interview here, and in which Aaron said, "Know that I am extremely proud of all that is Ween, and while Mickey and I are going our separate ways, I wish him only the best. I will always have nothing but love and respect for what we created together. I need to move on for myself and for my family. I still, as always, look forward to the future filled with music as Aaron Freeman." So at that point in time, it seemed as though he was willing to just end it completely and just walk away. And of course, he released the Rod McEwen album earlier that month in May there. So really, you get reports that Mickey didn't know what was happening, and the publicist didn't know what was happening. And I think that, if you just look at him as an artist, he'd done the Rod McEwen thing, which was a big departure from what Ween was, and he probably just wanted to keep going down that route. I mean, like Ween at this point was like 30 years old, so who knows what he was thinking, but he wanted to make more music. That's one thing that we do know. Okay. So some other interesting things that I found during that time was on July 18th, he did an interview on Pooch FM, which I believe I couldn't find out. There was a lack of information about what Pooch FM is. I found a website for them, but it was kind of like a 404 server error kind of website. But he does a pretty candid interview with a girl named Michelle, who's known him for a long time. Evidently, they made out with each other. If you have any more information on Pooch FM, I think it's something that's in New Hope or somewhere around where they're from. But if you have any information about that, I'd love to know what it is. Or Michelle's last name, I would love to credit her for the interview that I heard. And I'm going to put a link to that interview in the description of this video, and you can check that out. But yeah, there was a pretty candid interview that he gave. They talk about being punched by Gigi Allen. They talk about making out with each other. He talks about the Meat Puppets show that he went to. It was his first show at the age of 11. And they talk about Hall & Oates and all sorts of stuff. So check that interview out. It's very, very candid and very interesting. The second thing I found sort of a little bit later was on August 30th of 2012. He was on the Marc Maron podcast, which is a pretty good podcast if you've ever heard it. He's also on the show Glow there. I'm going to put a link to that as well in the description. And in that one, he talks mainly just about where he's at, what he's doing. He doesn't really get candid about any specific incidents that happened leading up to the big meltdown show there. He doesn't really get into that. He just kind of comes off as somebody who's just in his own skin and who's just getting on with things. And he does talk about the McEwen album, and he and Maron have a mutual interest in McEwen. Now, I actually tried to find a link to the Marvelous Clouds album. It's not on Spotify. Pardon me here. It's not on Spotify. And I couldn't really find much on it. So if you have a link, or if you know somewhere where you can buy that record, or take a listen to it that's not sort of Amazon or something like that, please let me know in the comments below. But that Marc Maron interview was some great stuff. Now, from what I gather, for the rest of 2012 and into 2013, he toured. He played solo, and he played with a guy named Joe Young, who was playing guitar with him, but he ended up being the bass player in the Freeman project after the album came out. And during that period, he also taught at Paul Green's School of Rock, which is the School of Rock that's the basis for the movie with Jack Black, School of Rock. So that's an interesting period in his life. So seems like he was just kind of milling around and getting himself together. And if you kind of look at photos from 2011 to the Marvelous Clouds sort of era and the solo stuff, you can see that he's putting on some weight and he's looking a lot healthier. And I, for one, was very glad to see that. So moving into 2014, Aaron started assembling musicians to record what would become the Freeman record, which brings us right here to what I have on the screen here, which is the Pitchfork review of the Freeman record. Now, I remember I was sitting there on Spotify just like refreshing away. I think for a while I couldn't play my guitar like a man. I think he may have put that out as a solo. I can't really remember, but I do recall hearing that first somehow. And then I remember watching Spotify, and then it came out, and I put that record on, and I mean, I was really into it right off the bat. Because the Marvelous Clouds one, I did listen to it a little bit at the time, but it really wasn't engaging to me, and I didn't have a connection to Rod McEwen, so it didn't really do it for me. But to see him come out with his own stuff, which I think like the Quebec album had come out a number of years before the hiatus and the breakup. And I mean, that was a spectacular piece of work. And I think everybody was waiting for more music. I think Diener put out an album actually before this, the Diener album or something like that. I can't quite recall. But when Aaron put this out, I mean, he is the voice of Ween. Diener is they're 50-50. They make up a whole machine. But I mean, I love Aaron Freeman's songwriting. I think he's a spectacular singer, and his characterizations and animation and life that he puts into things is really second to none. Like, it's fun music, it's theatrical, it's amazing. And to see him put out an album like this was wonderful to me. And right off the bat, I mean, you can see that Pitchfork gave it a 6.5. And I'm not even going to read the stuff that it's been on the screen for a while, but I'm not going to read the crap that Pitchfork wrote. I think Pitchfork kind of falls into the category of something that was a lot cooler before it was cool. Is that like a hipster thing to say? I'm not too sure. But in any event, I mean, this album came out, and I believe the first track, Covert Discretion. Let's just pull it up here. Aaron Freeman. Album here. Let's just look at the track listing here, and we can sort of go over it in a little bit better detail here. Not very interesting video, I know, but we must be accurate here. But anyways, the first track, which I believe was Covert Discretion, I mean, I remember that came out, and it's like you're kind of waiting for him to say something, but he doesn't really speak candidly about what happened in the incident. There's a lot of speculation on some of the Facebook groups and stuff like that, and I think Mickey posted some stuff on the Ween Appreciation Society page, and there was kind of some stuff leaked, and some people claim to know what happened, and blah, 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 but then Aaron comes out with this, and arbitrarily speaking, it's a fantastic record. I love it. But Covert Discretion is the first track, and it just airs everything out in a somewhat vague but somewhat blunt and blatant piece of music. It's very personal. It gets things addressed and sorted right away. And of course, at the end of the song, he has the whole "fuck you all, I've got a reason to live, and I'm never gonna die" bit. And that kind of says, yeah, that happened, but now this is happening. It's like when Burgundy gets Baxter punted off that bridge. It's just like, this is happening now. And I really love the way that they started that. And then track 2, we have the English and Western Stallion. So the stallion is galloping again. Freeman's back. And then for a while, I couldn't play my guitar like a man. If that was on a Ween record, that would be one of your favorites, and it's one of my favorite Freeman records in general. But man, it's a fantastic album. I mean, it's not the best complete piece of work, but one of the great things about Ween is you can kind of like, you can put it all together, because even on the early stuff, they had some really spectacular songs. And if you just sort of pluck songs from each individual album, you can mix them all up and it wouldn't seem out of place. So these are just a great collection of songs. I love the song Black Bush. I think that's a really bizarre and crazy song. But it was just a fantastic album, and it was great to see what at the end of the day is an excellent musician and a fantastic, brilliant songwriter writing fantastic and brilliant songs once again. So I was pleased as punch when this record came out, and thus rose Aaron Freeman once again. Once again, I don't think it's worth reading that Pitchfork review there, but it was a fantastic album. And on November the 2nd of 2014, at the Tractor in Seattle, I went down there with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my fiance, and I caught him playing to like 200 people at the Tractor in Seattle. It was frigging fantastic. The group of musicians that he had with him, the guitar player, I believe, played on the record, and the drummer as well. They were amazing, but the bass player, Joe Young, was good too. But he had, what's the guy's name? Zach Torino, I think was the guy's name, who is in Arc Iris. That band was opening for Aaron Freeman on the Freeman tour, and that keyboard player played with Aaron's band, and it was fantastic. Like, my girlfriend, my fiance now, but girlfriend at the time, she wasn't really into Ween or Aaron Freeman, didn't listen to anything. She went in completely cold, and she was like, that was a great show. They were great musicians, and he's an amazing performer, and they put on a great show. And I'll always remember that he did a solo version. I think it was solo, or maybe it was just him. He took over the keyboard from Zach, but he did a version of Square Wave Jam, I think it was that, and it was just insane. It was just him on a synth going nuts. He also did a solo guitar version of the Argus, which I'll always remember because I was like 20 feet away for starters, but also the bass player kept looking like he wanted to sort of come in at some point, and the drummer was just waving him off. He's like, no, you take this, man. You go with that. So having been at the Meltdown show, and then a couple of years later to see him in a small venue like that, and he played absolutely fantastic, was really something special. And it was great to see one of my favorite songwriters and artists rise up out of something like that, because, I mean, in life we can all sort of stumble and go down, but you know what? Never give up and keep rising up. And that's the most inspirational thing I'm ever going to say on YouTube, most likely. But anyways, that is the rise of Aaron Freeman. So I hope that you found some of that information entertaining, and I'm going to put links to everything that I've looked at throughout the course of this video up in the description. If you have anything that you'd like to say about this, or if you have any disagreements, like I say, let me know in the comments. But this is another cool site here that I go to sometimes. It's called Brown Tracker. I think it's a torrent site. I've used it years ago. I haven't used it recently, but it's I think it's just B-sides and rarities and performance audio and video. And let's just see here. There's a browse function. Let's see what we can look at here. Yeah, there's tons of stuff, but it's peer-to-peer. It's all torrent. So it's kind of like tape trading was back in the day. I don't think it's legit, but I don't think Ween minds, because this site has been up here for some time. So check that out. And if you run this site, or you know somebody who runs this site, I'd love to talk to them, because I just think this is pretty cool. Oh, staff. There's a little staff option there. You're finding this out as I'm finding this out. Very nice. Anyhow, maybe I'll write them a little letter. But something else that you might want to check out here is some performance footage from WFUV.org, which is I think it's one of those public radio stations or whatever. But there is some excellent footage from the Freeman tour with that band I was telling you about. You can see the man himself. He's in excellent form. Let's see if we can find a frame with his face. No, that's Joe Young there. But geez, we're going to find everybody but, oh, there he is. There he is. Anyways, there's some excellent footage. They do a couple of songs here. I think they'd be linked in the side there, but this is a really good version of, well, for a while I couldn't play my guitar like a man, and he actually comes in with the solo a little bit early, and you can see him just go like, well, whatever. But in any event, that was the episode. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I will be putting out another episode in a couple of weeks. Thank you for listening to this, watching this video rather. If you've watched it to the end, I thank you. Again, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are so inclined. And I encourage you to have a good day, whatever's left of your day. It could be late at night. You could be laying in bed watching this video thinking, why did I just watch all that? Maybe you've just skimmed through and you've come to this, and I've really raised a pertinent issue, and you're thinking, why indeed have I watched this? Why indeed? In any event, the next episode I already kind of have figured out, and it's going to be called Dean Ween, Rock God. And there's the man himself in all of his glory. I think we've kind of covered the Jeaner meltdown, and we have looked at the Jeaner reprise, and now we're going to get into some Deaner stuff. And I'm going to be talking about Dean Ween. I'm going to leave it at that. You can watch the next episode. Now I'm going to put a link to the first episode at the end of this. And again, sorry to ask you again, but please subscribe to the channel if you would like. Have a nice day.